My name is Lena, and at 32 years old, I thought I knew everything about my husband Daniel until the hospital called at 9:42 p.m. to tell me he was dead. I screamed, I collapsed, I grieved for hours in our empty home. But when I heard our front door unlock at midnight and saw him walk inside like nothing had happened, I realized something far more terrifying than death had entered my life. The way he hugged me felt wrong. His coffee tasted different the next morning, and the scar behind his ear that had never existed before made my blood run cold. If you're watching this video right now, drop a comment telling me where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about the thin line between love and survival when the person sleeping next to you isn't who they claim to be. The phone call came at 9:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, right when I was wiping down the kitchen counter after a quiet dinner alone. Daniel had been out of town since Sunday for a medical conference in Denver, something about new cardiac protocols he'd been excited to attend. The house felt emptier than usual without him, but I'd gotten used to these brief separations over our 6 years of marriage. When my phone lit up with an unknown number, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Carver? A woman's voice, trembling and hesitant. Yes, this is Lena Carver. This is Grace Holloway from St. Catherine's Hospital. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. Ma'am, I'm so sorry to inform you that your husband Daniel was involved in a severe highway collision earlier this evening. He died en route to the hospital. I'm so sorry. The dish towel slipped from my hands. The world tilted sideways. What? The word barely made it past my lips.
No.
No, that's impossible. He's in Denver. He's at a conference. Ma'am, he was brought in from Interstate 40, about 20 miles outside the city. The accident was catastrophic. I'm truly sorry for your loss. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor, phone pressed against my ear, unable to form words. A scream built in my chest and erupted, raw and animal-like, echoing through the empty house. Mrs. Carver? Mrs. Carver, are you there? How did this happen? I managed to choke out between sobs. I can't provide more details on a recorded line, she said quickly, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. But ma'am, I'm so sorry. I truly am. There was something strange about the way she said it. Personal. Like she knew Daniel somehow, like this wasn't just another notification call she had to make. Before I could ask anything else, the line went dead. I sat on that kitchen floor for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, phone clutched in my hand, staring at nothing. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts at once. This couldn't be real. There had to be a mistake. Daniel was careful, always wore his seatbelt, never drove recklessly. Then another thought struck me, cold and sharp. His conference was in Denver. Interstate 40 doesn't go through Denver. It cuts through the southern part of the state, nowhere near where he was supposed to be. With shaking hands, I pulled up my text with Daniel. His last message had come in that morning. Love you. Going into a lecture now. See you Thursday night. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested anything was wrong. I called the hotel where he was supposed to be staying. After being transferred twice, a bored desk clerk told me, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have a Daniel Carver checked in. Are you sure you have the right hotel? The room spun. My stomach lurched. Where had he been? Why would he lie about the conference? I tried his phone. It went straight to voicemail, his familiar voice asking me to leave a message. I hung up without speaking, tears streaming down my face. The next few hours passed in a fog of disbelief and grief. I called his mother, who dissolved into hysterics. I called his brother, who said he'd drive down immediately. I sat in Daniel's favorite chair, wrapped in one of his sweatshirts, breathing in his scent and trying to make sense of a world where he no longer existed. Around midnight, exhaustion finally began to pull at me. My eyes burned from crying. My head throbbed. I thought about going to bed, but couldn't bear the idea of sleeping in our room without him. That's when I heard it. The metallic scrape of a key sliding into the front door lock. My entire body went rigid. The sound of the deadbolt turning echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. Then the door opened, and footsteps crossed the threshold. Heavy, familiar footsteps, followed by a cough. That small, throat-clearing cough Daniel always made when he came home. Terror flooded my system, cold and paralyzing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't possible. Lena? His voice. Daniel's voice, calling from the entryway. Why are all the lights still on? I forced myself to stand on trembling legs and walked toward the hallway. And there he was, shaking rain from his hair, setting down his overnight bag, completely and utterly alive. He looked up at me and smiled. Hey, babe. Why are you awake? It's past midnight. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. He walked toward me, and I noticed he was limping slightly. I finally whispered. You died. His expression shifted to confusion. Then he laughed. A short, quiet laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. What kind of joke is that?
I'm fine.
Conference just ran late, and my flight got delayed. The hospital called, I said, my voice rising. They said you were in an accident. They said you died. Daniel's face went through several expressions too quickly for me to read. That's insane. Look at me. I'm standing right here. Somebody obviously made a horrible mistake. He reached for me. Come here. You must have been terrified. He pulled me into his arms, but something was wrong. Everything was wrong. The way he held me felt stiff, mechanical. The pressure of his hands on my back was different, heavier somehow. And his cologne. Daniel always wore the same subtle sandalwood scent I'd bought him for our anniversary. This smell was sharper, more chemical. I pulled back slightly and looked up at him. His face was Daniel's face. Same brown eyes, same slight crook to his nose from a childhood break, same small scar on his chin from a biking accident. But something in his expression felt foreign. Your hair's wet, I said stupidly. It's raining. He gestured toward the door. Pretty hard, too. As he turned his head, something caught my eye. Behind his left ear, partially hidden by his hair, was a thin white scar. Clean, surgical-looking, and definitely not something I'd ever seen before. I knew every inch of Daniel's body after 6 years together. That scar had never existed. When did you get that? I touched the area near his ear. He jerked his head away. Get what? That scar. I've always had that. You probably just never noticed. His tone had an edge now, irritation creeping in. Lena, you're in shock. That phone call obviously scared you. Let's just go to bed, okay? But I hadn't imagined it. The scar was there, pale and raised against his skin. He took my hand and led me toward the bedroom. Max, our golden retriever who usually bounded toward Daniel the moment he came home, stayed in his bed in the corner, watching us. The dog's ears were flat against his head, and he let out a low, uncertain whine. What's wrong with Max? Daniel asked. I don't know. He's been acting strange all evening. Daniel shrugged and headed for the bedroom. I followed mechanically, my mind screaming that something was catastrophically wrong, but unable to pinpoint exactly what. He changed into pajamas with his back to me, then climbed into bed like this was any other night. Coming? He asked when I remained standing by the dresser. I nodded and got into bed, but every muscle in my body was tense. I lay there in the darkness, listening to his breathing beside me. It sounded different too. Deeper. Slower. Daniel had mild sleep apnea and sometimes snored softly. This man breathed evenly, rhythmically, like he was mimicking sleep rather than actually sleeping. Hours passed. I didn't close my eyes once. As weak dawn light began filtering through the curtains, one thought circled my mind over and over. If this man isn't Daniel, who is sleeping next to me. Morning came with false normalcy. He woke up, stretched, and padded into the kitchen to make coffee. I followed at a distance, watching him like I'd never seen him before. He pulled out the French roast from the cupboard. Daniel never drank French roast. He insisted it was too bitter, always chose the medium roast Colombian blend. Since when do you drink that? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He glanced at the bag. I always drink this. No, you don't. You hate dark roast. His jaw tightened for just a moment. People's tastes change, Lena. Maybe I forgot. I've been stressed with work. He measured out the grounds, added 3 spoonfuls of sugar to his mug. Daniel took 1 spoonful. Always exactly 1. I said nothing. Just watched. When he finished his coffee, he grabbed his work bag and keys. I've got to get to the hospital early today. We're short-staffed. He walked to his car in the driveway, me trailing behind. He pressed his thumb to the biometric lock on the driver's door. Nothing happened. He tried again. The lock didn't respond, the little light staying red. Damn thing must be glitching, he muttered, pulling out his physical key instead. But that lock had never glitched before. It was fingerprint activated. It only opened for Daniel's print. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I ran back inside and grabbed his phone from where he'd left it charging. My hands shook as I unlocked it with his passcode, our anniversary date, which thankfully still worked. The phone was almost empty. No text message history beyond a few automated bank notifications. No call logs at all. His photo gallery, which usually held thousands of pictures of US, of Max, of his coffee experiments and medical journals, was completely blank. This wasn't Daniel's phone. Or someone had wiped it clean. I heard a sound behind me and spun around. Max stood in the doorway, ears still pinned back, staring toward the front door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I walked over and knelt beside him, running my hand through his golden fur. Max had been Daniel's dog before we got married, his loyal companion for 8 years. He loved Daniel more than anyone. But ever since that man walked through the door last night, Max had been acting terrified. Dogs know. They sense things we can't. The phone in my hand buzzed. A text from an unknown number appeared. "Call me when you're alone. I need to talk to you about Daniel. This is Grace, the nurse who called you." My heart hammered. Before I could respond, the phone rang in my hand. Not the one I was holding, Daniel's phone, but my own phone on the counter. I grabbed it. "Hello. Mrs. Carver, this is Grace Holloway again from St. Catherine's." The same trembling voice from last night. "I need to ask you something important. Has anyone claiming to be your husband contacted you?" Ice water flooded my veins. "What do you mean?" "Ma'am, your husband's body is still here at the morgue. We're waiting for family to come identify and claim it. But we've had concerning reports. Is there someone in your home right now claiming to be Daniel Carver?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed completely. "Mrs. Carver?" Her voice rose with urgency. "If there is someone there, you need to be very careful. Do you understand me? Very careful." The line went dead. I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, the truth crashing over me like a wave. The man who came home last night, who slept beside me, who drank the wrong coffee and couldn't unlock his car, that man wasn't Daniel. And if he wasn't Daniel, who the hell was he? And where was my actual husband? I had to know for certain. I grabbed the coffee mug he'd used this morning, carefully placing it in a plastic bag. Then I drove to the local police station, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. At the station, I explained my situation to a sympathetic officer who looked at me like I might be having a mental breakdown. But he agreed to run the fingerprints as a favor, probably just to calm a grieving widow's paranoid delusions. 2 hours later, he called me back into his office. His face had changed, all traces of patronizing sympathy gone. "Mrs. Carver," he said slowly, "these fingerprints came back with no match in our system. They don't match your husband's prints on file from his medical licensing. They don't match anything." The room tilted. "What does that mean?" "It means whoever drank from this mug isn't Daniel Carver." He leaned forward. "Ma'am, where is this person now?" "At work. At St. Catherine's Hospital. At least, that's where he said he was going." The officer's expression darkened. "Do not go home alone. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay?" I nodded numbly, but I was barely listening. My mind was spinning through every moment since that man walked through my door. Every wrong detail. Every subtle difference. The way he looked at me, not with Daniel's warmth but with something colder, more calculating. He'd been studying me, learning me, pretending. I drove home in a daze, the officer's warnings echoing in my head. But I had to get some things, had to figure out what to do next. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw his car already there. He was home early. My stomach dropped. I sat in my car for a full minute, trying to steady my breathing before forcing myself to go inside. He was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window behind him, casting his face in shadow. "Have you been somewhere?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle. But underneath was something else. Something threatening. "Just running errands," I said, trying to sound normal. "Grocery shopping." "Really?" He tilted his head. "Because I don't see any groceries. They didn't have what I needed." He stared at me for a long moment, and in that silence, I saw the truth in his eyes. He knew I was onto him, and he knew that I knew. Then he smiled, slow and cold. "You're a terrible liar, Lena." I took a step backward toward the door. "Don't," he said, the single word sharp as a knife. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About your little trip to the police station this morning." He pushed off from the counter and walked toward me. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" My blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The fingerprints." "Very clever." He was close now, close enough that I could see the way his pupils had dilated, could smell that wrong cologne. "But you've made things complicated now. And I really, really don't like complications." "Who are you?" The question came out as a whisper. He smiled wider. "Does it matter? I'm your husband now. That's all you need to know." He reached out and touched my cheek, and I flinched. "Don't make this difficult, Lena. Play along, and nobody has to get hurt." "Where's Daniel?" My voice broke. "Where's my real husband?" Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe. Or amusement. Daniel made some very poor choices. He got involved in things he shouldn't have. "But you?" He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "You're going to be smart, aren't you?" Every instinct screamed at me to run, but he was blocking the door, and I knew if I tried, he'd catch me before I made it 2 steps. So I did the only thing I could. I nodded. "Good girl," he murmured, stepping back. "Now let's have dinner like a normal married couple. And tomorrow, we're going to go to the hospital together. You're going to tell them you were mistaken, that I'm your husband, and that everything is fine. Understand?" I nodded again, my mind racing. I had to get out. Had to find help. Had to find Daniel if he was still alive somewhere. But first, I had to survive tonight. That evening was the longest of my life. We sat at the dinner table, and I forced myself to eat while he watched me with those calculating eyes. He made small talk, asked about my day, played the role of concerned husband with disturbing accuracy. When it was time for bed, terror seized me completely. I couldn't sleep next to him. I couldn't. "I think I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," I said. "I'm not feeling well." His expression hardened. "No. You'll sleep here. With me. Like you always do." There was no room for argument in his tone. So I lay in the darkness beside this stranger, every muscle rigid, listening to him breathe. At some point, exhaustion must have overtaken me because I drifted into a fitful sleep filled with nightmares. I dreamed of Daniel calling my name, his voice distant and desperate. I dreamed of searching through endless hospital corridors, opening door after door, never finding him. When I woke, pale morning light filtered through the curtains, and the man beside me was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching me sleep. "Good morning," he said softly. I screamed. Over the next few days, I lived in a waking nightmare. He controlled everything: where I went, who I talked to, what I did. He'd taken my phone, replaced it with a new one that he insisted was better but that I knew he could monitor. He drove me to the grocery store and waited in the car. He stood outside the bathroom door when I showered. The only time I had any freedom was when he left for work, if he actually went to work. For all I knew, he just drove around the block and came back to spy on me. But I wasn't just sitting there helpless. I was planning, observing, learning his patterns. On the 3rd day, I found Daniel's old toolbox in the garage, buried under a pile of camping equipment. Taped to the underside of the metal lid was a small key I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. It was the type of key used for safety deposit boxes. Daniel had never mentioned having one. In 6 years of marriage, he'd never said a word about it. That afternoon, while the imposter was supposedly at the hospital, I drove to our bank. The teller seemed nervous when I asked about Daniel's safety deposit box, kept glancing toward the manager's office, but eventually she led me to the vault. The box was small, unremarkable, but what was inside made my world tilt sideways. A passport with Daniel's name, but someone else's face. A burner phone with a cracked screen. Stacks of $100 bills, at least $10,000 worth. And a photograph of a woman and a young boy, neither of whom I'd ever seen before. On the back of the photo, in Daniel's handwriting, "Protect them." Who were these people? Why had Daniel hidden their picture in a secret safety deposit box with cash and a fake passport? The burner phone still had a charge. When I turned it on, there were dozens of text messages, the most recent from 3 days before Daniel's supposed accident. "They know. You need to disappear. Take the evidence and run. I can't leave Lena. She's the leverage they'll use. If you love her, you'll stay away. I can't. I won't abandon her." The last message, sent at 7:34 p.m. the night of the accident. "They're here. If anything happens to me, she has everything she needs. Tell her I'm sorry." My vision blurred with tears. Daniel had known someone was coming for him. He'd try to protect me by keeping me in the dark. And now he was either dead or missing, and an imposter had taken his place in my home and my life. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. "Can I help you find something else, Mrs. Carver?" The bank teller stood in the doorway, wringing her hands nervously. "No, I started to say, then noticed the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. "Is everything okay?" "I probably shouldn't say anything," she whispered, stepping closer. "But there was a man here yesterday asking about your husband's accounts. He said he was Daniel Carver, but—" She bit her lip. The signature didn't match. We turned him away, but he seemed angry. Ice flooded my veins. The imposter had tried to access Daniel's money. Did he say anything else? She shook her head. Just that he'd be back with proper documentation. "Mrs. Carver, I don't know what's going on, but be careful." I stuffed everything back into the safety deposit box except the burner phone and the photo, which I slipped into my purse. As I left the bank, my own phone, the one the imposter had given me, buzzed with a text. "Where are you?" My stomach clenched. I typed back quickly. "Bank. Depositing a check. Come home. Now." The drive back felt like driving toward my own execution. When I pulled into the driveway, he was standing on the front porch, arms crossed, face dark with anger. "You were gone for 2 hours, he said as I approached. "It doesn't take 2 hours to deposit a check." There was a long line. I tried to walk past him, but he grabbed my arm. "Don't lie to me." Each word was punctuated with pressure on my arm, just shy of painful but threatening to cross that line. "I'm not lying," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let go of me." For a moment, I thought he might not. His fingers dug in a little harder, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Then he released me and stepped back. "Get inside," he said quietly. I did, my heart hammering. Max cowered in the corner, whimpering. The imposter followed me in and closed the door with deliberate care, turning the deadbolt with a loud click. "I think we need to have a serious conversation," he said, walking toward me slowly. "About trust. About honesty. About what happens when you don't follow simple rules." I backed up until I hit the wall. "I went to the bank. That's all." "Really?" "Because I called the bank. They said you accessed Daniel's safety deposit box." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "What did you find?" My mind raced. "Nothing important. Just some old documents." "Show me." I left them there. "Lena." He said my name like a warning. "I'm trying very hard to be patient with you, but you're making it difficult. And when things become difficult, I have to make difficult decisions." "What do you want from me?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "Why are you doing this? Where is Daniel?" His expression shifted to something almost pitying. Daniel made powerful people very angry. And now those people want to make sure his loose ends are tied up. You're a loose end, Lena. Then why am I still alive? Because you're more useful alive. For now. He reached out and touched my face almost gently. But usefulness can expire. So I'd suggest you start being very, very cooperative. That night, after another tense dinner where I could barely eat, I lay awake again beside this monster, trying to figure out my next move. I had to contact someone. Had to get help. But he'd taken my phone, monitored my every movement. Then I remembered Daniel's old laptop. He'd kept it in the garage, said he used it for backing up files. If the imposter didn't know about it, around 3 a.m., when his breathing had finally evened into what sounded like real sleep, I carefully slid out of bed. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot to my ears. I made it to the garage, found the laptop buried under a stack of old medical journals, and powered it on. The screen glowed to life, and I held my breath, praying he'd left it unlocked. He had. I opened his files, searching desperately for anything that might help me. And then I found it, a folder labeled insurance, innocuous enough that I almost skipped over it. Inside were dozens of documents. Medical records with altered dates. Death certificates for people who apparently didn't exist. Financial transfers from St. Catherine's Hospital to offshore accounts. Names, dates, dollar amounts. Daniel had been documenting a massive fraud scheme. One file was simply titled, "If Anything Happens." I clicked it. A video file opened. Daniel's face appeared on screen, looking tired and scared, sitting in what looked like a hotel room. "Lena," his recorded voice said, and hearing it made my eyes fill with tears. "If you're watching this, something's gone wrong. I'm so sorry I never told you about any of this. I was trying to protect you." He glanced over his shoulder nervously before continuing. 6 months ago, I noticed irregularities in patient records at the hospital. People who were declared dead, but whose families I couldn't find. Death certificates being filed for insurance payouts, but no actual bodies. I started digging, and I found, God, Lena, it's so much bigger than I thought. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. There's a whole network. Doctors, administrators, people at the insurance companies. They're faking deaths, collecting payouts, laundering money. And when I confronted one of them, they threatened you. They said if I told anyone, they'd make sure you disappeared. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a sob. I tried to gather enough evidence to go to the FBI, but they found out. They're coming for me, Lena. I can feel it. I've been staying in motels, using cash, trying to stay ahead of them. But if they get to me... He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes intense. Don't trust anyone who claims to be me. They have people who specialize in this, in replacing targets, in infiltrating families. If someone comes to you saying they're me, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. He paused, his voice breaking. I love you so much. I'm sorry I brought this into our lives. All the evidence is on this laptop, backed up to a secure cloud drive. The password is your mother's maiden name plus the year we got married. Take it to the FBI field office in the city. Ask for Agent Sarah Chin. She's the only one I've made contact with, the only one I trust. The video ended with Daniel staring into the camera, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. I sat in the dark garage, tears streaming down my face, the laptop screen casting blue light across my hands. Daniel had been trying to protect me. He'd sacrificed everything to keep me safe. And now I had the evidence. I had what they were looking for. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, and my blood turned to ice. The imposter stood in the garage doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. He'd been watching me. For how long, I didn't know. Well, he said softly, almost sadly. This is disappointing. He walked toward me slowly, and I scrambled backward, clutching the laptop. Stay away from me. You know I can't do that. He crouched down in front of me, and I saw something new in his eyes. Not anger. Almost respect. You're stronger than I thought. Smarter. I actually admire that. Who are you really? I demanded. My name is Mason Vale. I'm very good at what I do, which is becoming other people, replacing them, living their lives so perfectly that no one ever questions it. He gestured at himself. I've been Daniel Carver for 4 days, and aside from you, no one suspects a thing. Where is he? Where's my husband? Mason's expression shifted to something unreadable. Daniel isn't dead. Not yet, anyway. Let's call it protective custody. We need him alive in case we need information. But whether he stays alive depends entirely on you. My heart leaped with desperate hope. He's alive? For now. And he can stay that way if you cooperate. Mason reached out and closed the laptop. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me this laptop and any other evidence Daniel hid. You're going to stop investigating, stop asking questions, stop trying to escape. And in return, I'll make sure Daniel keeps breathing. How do I know you're telling the truth? He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Daniel, unconscious, tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. Bruised but alive. That was taken 2 hours ago, Mason said. He's being kept somewhere safe. Uncomfortable, but safe. And he'll stay that way as long as you play along. What do they want from me? Nothing. You're just leverage to keep him quiet. Once we're sure he hasn't told anyone else, once we've recovered all his evidence, you both can go back to your normal lives. Mason smiled, but we both knew he was lying. Simple as that. And if I don't cooperate? His smile faded. Then things get very unpleasant for everyone. Starting with Daniel. I stared at him, my mind racing. He had Daniel. He had all the power. But I also had something he wanted, this laptop, this evidence. As long as I had it, I had leverage. I need proof he's alive, I said. Recent proof. And I need to know he's not being hurt. Mason studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. I'll arrange a video call. Tomorrow. Then you'll hand over everything, and we can all move forward. He stood and extended his hand to help me up. I didn't take it, pushing myself to my feet independently. Take the laptop back inside, he said. And Lena, don't try to run. Don't try to contact anyone. I'm watching you every second. And if you do anything stupid, Daniel pays the price. Understand? I nodded, clutching the laptop to my chest. We walked back inside together, and I placed the laptop on the kitchen counter. Mason watched me with those cold, calculating eyes, and I realized with absolute certainty that he had no intention of letting either of us go. Once he had what he wanted, we were both dead. But I also realized something else. He'd made a mistake by showing me Daniel was alive, by giving me hope, because now I wasn't just trying to survive. I was planning to fight back. And I would burn down everyone involved in this conspiracy, if that's what it took to get my husband back. The next morning, I woke with a new resolve burning in my chest. Mason was in the shower, and I could hear the water running through the pipes. I had maybe 5 minutes. I made breakfast with steady hands, scrambling eggs and brewing coffee. The French roast he preferred, not the Colombian blend Daniel loved. When Mason emerged, hair damp and dressed in one of Daniel's work shirts, I smiled at him. Good morning, I said, my voice calm and pleasant. He paused, studying my face with suspicion. You're in a better mood. I thought about what you said last night. You're right. Fighting this won't help anyone, especially not Daniel. I set a plate in front of him. I just want him safe. That's all I care about. Mason sat slowly, still watching me like I might lunge at him with a knife. But I kept my expression open, compliant. After a moment, he picked up his fork and started eating. Smart choice, he said between bites. I knew you'd see reason eventually. While he ate, I moved around the kitchen, wiping counters and putting dishes away. As I passed behind him to reach the sink, I slipped a hand into his jacket hanging on the chair. My fingers found the inner pocket and deposited the tiny GPS tracker I'd pulled from Daniel's old drone equipment. It was no bigger than a button, would last for days on its battery, and Mason would never notice it. I do have one request, I said, returning to stand across from him. Before I hand over the laptop, I need to see Daniel. On video, like you promised. I need to know he's really okay. Mason wiped his mouth with a napkin. Tonight. After I get back from work. I'll arrange the call. Thank you. I even managed to sound grateful. He left 20 minutes later, and the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I ran to my hidden phone. Daniel's old burner I'd kept tucked inside a tampon box in the bathroom, the one place I knew Mason would never look. I pulled up the tracking app I'd installed the night before and watched the small blued that represented Mason's location moving through the city streets. He drove for 15 minutes, then stopped at a location far from St. Catherine's Hospital, an industrial area on the east side. Abandoned warehouses and empty lots. I zoomed in on the satellite view, memorizing the address. Then I grabbed my keys and a small canister of pepper spray I'd found in Daniel's emergency kit. I had to see where Mason was going. Had to know what he was really doing during these work hours. Following at a distance, I watched him pull into a gravel lot surrounded by rusted chain-link fencing. 3 other cars were already there. Men in dark clothes emerged from one of the warehouses as Mason approached, greeting him with handshakes and serious expressions. I parked 2 blocks away and crept closer on foot, staying low behind abandoned equipment and overgrown shrubs. Through a grimy window, I could see them gathering around a table covered in papers and what looked like weapons. Mason spoke to them, his posture confident and commanding. This wasn't a man pretending to be a doctor. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous and clearly in charge. I took photos with the burner phone, capturing faces, license plates, everything I could. Then Mason turned toward the window, and I dropped below the sill, heart hammering. When I risked another glance, they were moving toward the door. I ran back to my car and drove home, hands shaking on the wheel. Once there, I backed up all the photos to the cloud drive Daniel had mentioned, using my mother's maiden name and our wedding year as the password, just as he'd instructed. But I wasn't ready to go to the FBI yet. Not when they had Daniel. Not when one wrong move could get him killed. My phone, the one Mason had given me, buzzed with a text. "Where are you?" I replied immediately. "Home. Doing laundry." "Stay there." As if I had a choice. That afternoon, while Mason was still gone, the burner phone rang with an unknown number. My pulse spiked as I answered. "Lena Carver?" A woman's voice, familiar somehow. "Yes, this is Grace Holloway, the nurse who called you about Daniel. We need to meet. Today. As soon as possible." "I don't know if I can." "He's alive, Lena. Daniel is alive, and I know where they're keeping him. But we're running out of time." My breath caught. "How do you know this?" "Because I was part of it. And I can't live with what I've done." Her voice cracked. "Meet me at the Riverside Park gazebo in 1 hour. Come alone, but make sure someone knows where you're going. These people are dangerous." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, mind racing. This could be a trap. Grace could be working with Mason, trying to draw me out. But what if she was telling the truth? What if she really did know where Daniel was? I couldn't ignore the possibility. I wrote a quick note with all the information I'd gathered. Mason's real name, the warehouse location, the photo evidence, and sealed it in an envelope addressed to Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI field office. Then I tucked it under the floorboard beneath our bed, where Daniel used to hide birthday presents. If something happened to me, someone would eventually find it. The drive to Riverside Park took 20 minutes. I parked near the entrance and walked through the scattered groups of joggers and families toward the old gazebo by the water. Grace Holloway stood with her back to me, wearing a dark hoodie despite the mild weather. "Grace," I called softly as I approached. She turned, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Her face was pale, and she had a bruise on her cheekbone that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for coming," she said, glancing around nervously. "We don't have much time. They're watching both of us." "Tell me about Daniel. Where is he?" "There's a property about 40 miles north. An old farm that the hospital administrator's family owns. They're keeping him in the barn." She pulled out her phone and showed me a location pin. "But Lena, you can't go there alone. They have guards. The man in your house, Mason Vale, he's just one of many." "Why are you helping me?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Because I made the call telling you Daniel was dead. They made me do it." They wanted you scared and confused, wanted Mason to slip into Daniel's life easily while you were grieving. I've been part of this fraud scheme for 2 years, processing fake death certificates, and She wiped her eyes roughly. I can't do it anymore. Not after seeing what they did to Daniel. He's a good man who is trying to do the right thing. What's the fraud exactly? Daniel's video mentioned insurance payouts. The hospital declares patients dead who aren't actually dead. We file death certificates, collect insurance money and government death benefits. Then the deceased persons get new identities and are relocated. They're usually people in witness protection or trying to escape abusive situations who pay massive fees for the service. But lately, it's expanded to people who just don't want to pay taxes or have legal problems. It's a whole underground network. I felt sick. And when Daniel found out, he started copying files, tracking payments, documenting everything. They caught him because he got sloppy near the end, too desperate to be careful. When they realized how much evidence he had, they staged the accident to make you think he was dead, sent Mason to find and destroy whatever Daniel had hidden. Grace grabbed my arm. That laptop you found, that's everything. That's what will bring them all down. But they'll kill both of you to get it. A black SUV suddenly pulled into the parking lot, moving too fast. Grace's face went white. Run, she whispered urgently. They found us. Come with me. I can't. I'm already dead. She shoved me hard toward the trees. Save Daniel. Make this mean something. 2 men in dark suits emerged from the SUV, moving toward us with purpose. I turned and ran into the wooded area behind the gazebo, branches whipping my face, lungs burning. Behind me, I heard Grace scream, then the sound of car doors slamming. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, fumbled with my keys, and peeled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw the SUV pulling away with Grace inside. Tears blurred my vision as I drove, taking random turns to make sure I wasn't being followed. Grace had sacrificed herself to give me that information. I couldn't let it be for nothing. But when I got home, Mason's car was already in the driveway. I parked and tried to compose myself, wiping my face and steadying my breathing before walking inside. He was sitting on the couch, his expression dark and furious. Where were you? His voice was deadly quiet. I went for a drive. I needed to clear my head.
Funny.
Because I got a very interesting call 20 minutes ago about my wife meeting with a certain hospital nurse in a public park. He stood slowly. Want to try again? My mind raced for an excuse, but he was already crossing the room toward me. I told you not to contact anyone. I told you what would happen if you did. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me closer. Do you think I'm joking? Do you think this is a game? She contacted me. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. I didn't seek her out. And what did she tell you? Where's Daniel? That we're the bad guys. He laughed bitterly. Poor, naive Lena. Did she mention she's been pocketing money from the scheme for years? That she's just as guilty as everyone else? She was trying to help me. She was trying to save herself. He shoved me backward into the wall. And now she's been handled, which means one less loose end to worry about. Horror washed over me. What did you do to her? What I should have done weeks ago. His face was inches from mine now. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that laptop. You're going to tell me everywhere Daniel might have hidden backup evidence. And then you're going to very quietly forget any of this ever happened. Or what? The words came out steadier than I felt. Or, I put a bullet in Daniel's head and make you watch. The room fell silent, except for our breathing. Finally, I nodded, letting defeat show in my posture. The laptop's in the bedroom. Let me get it. He followed me upstairs, staying close. I retrieved the laptop from where I'd hidden it in the closet and handed it over. Mason opened it immediately, checking the files. Password. I gave it to him. He scrolled through Daniel's evidence folder, his jaw tightening as he saw how much information was there. This is everything?
No backups.
That's everything. The lie came easily now. I'd gotten good at lying to him. Mason closed the laptop with satisfaction. Smart choice. I'll make arrangements for you to see Daniel tomorrow. One last video call to say goodbye before you both start your new lives. New lives. You didn't think we'd just let you go back to normal, did you? He smiled coldly. You and Daniel know too much. You'll be relocated. New identities. New city. It's actually quite generous considering the circumstances. But his eyes told a different story. There would be no new lives. Just unmarked graves somewhere remote. That night, I lay awake beside him again. But this time, I wasn't paralyzed with fear. I was planning. Grace had given me the location. I had transportation. I had Daniel's gun from the safe in the garage, the one Mason didn't know about because it had been hidden behind old paint cans. I just needed the right moment. Around 2 a.m., Mason's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He grabbed it quickly, stepping into the hallway to answer. I heard him speaking in low, urgent tones. Tomorrow night, yes, both of them, the farm, understood. My blood ran cold. Tomorrow night. Whatever they had planned, it was happening soon. I had to move now. The moment Mason fell asleep, I slipped out of bed with the practiced silence of someone who'd done this before. I dressed in dark clothes, grabbed the gun and pepper spray, took the keys to Daniel's old truck that had been sitting unused in the garage, and left through the back door. The drive north took 50 minutes on dark country roads. I followed Grace's location pin to a property marked only by a rusted mailbox. A long gravel driveway disappeared into trees. I parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, staying in the tree line. The farmhouse was dark, but lights blazed from the barn. 2 men stood guard outside, smoking and talking in low voices. My hands shook as I crept closer. How was I supposed to get past them? I was an elementary school teacher, not some action hero. The gun felt heavy and foreign in my waistband. Then one of the guards got a phone call. He walked away from the barn to take it, leaving only one man by the door. It was now or never. I picked up a rock and threw it hard toward the house. It clattered against the metal siding with a loud bang. The remaining guard turned toward the sound, hand on his weapon, and walked toward the house to investigate. I ran. My feet flew across the open ground toward the barn door. I slipped inside and pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. The barn's interior was dimly lit by overhead bulbs. Old farming equipment lined the walls. And in the center, tied to a metal chair, was Daniel. My Daniel. He was thinner, bruised, his face swollen and cut. His head hung forward like he was unconscious or asleep. But he was alive. I ran to him, falling to my knees beside the chair. Daniel, I whispered urgently, fumbling with the ropes binding his wrists. Daniel, wake up. It's me. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then suddenly sharp with recognition and terror. Lena? His voice was hoarse, broken.
No.
No, you shouldn't be here. They'll kill you. I'm getting you out. The ropes were thick, knotted tight. I pulled out the small knife I'd brought and started sawing at them. Lena, listen to me. He tried to lean forward despite his bindings. You need to run.
Forget about me.
Just run. I'm not leaving you. Tears streamed down my face as I worked at the ropes. I'm not losing you again. The first rope snapped free. I started on the second. I'm so sorry, Daniel whispered, his eyes wet. I brought this into our lives. I should have been more careful. You were trying to do the right thing. That's who you are. The second rope gave way. That's why I love you. I moved to his ankles, cutting frantically. We were running out of time. Those guards would be back any second. There's a truck a quarter-mile south, I told him as I freed his feet. Keys are in it. Can you run? I can do anything to get back to you. I helped him stand, his weight heavy against me as his legs adjusted to bearing weight again. We stumbled toward the door together and ran straight into Mason. He stood in the doorway, gun drawn, expression cold as winter. Well, isn't this touching? I pulled the gun from my waistband and aimed it at him with shaking hands. Get out of our way. Mason laughed. Lena, you've never fired a gun in your life. You're not going to start now. Try me. For a moment, We stood in a standoff. Mason with his gun trained on us, me with mine pointed at him, Daniel leaning against me, barely able to stand. "Here's what's going to happen," Mason said calmly. "You're going to put down that gun, and we're going to finish this the way it was always meant to finish."
Clean. Quiet.
Two people who knew too much, gone without a trace. "The FBI has everything," I said. "All of Daniel's evidence. If anything happens to us, Agent Sarah Chin gets a full report." Something flickered across Mason's face. Uncertainty. "You're lying." "Am I? Want to take that chance?" I steadied my shaking hands. "Let us walk out of here, and maybe you can run before they come for you. Or try to kill us and guarantee you spend the rest of your life in prison." Mason's jaw clenched. Behind him, I heard voices, the guards returning. "This isn't over," Mason said. Then Daniel, using the last of his strength, shoved me hard to the side. A gunshot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Daniel cried out and went down, blood blooming across his shoulder. I screamed and fired my own gun. The kick sent me stumbling backward, but the bullet found its mark, Mason's leg. He collapsed with a shout. "Run!" Daniel gasped from the ground. "Lino, run!" But I wouldn't leave him. Not again. I dropped beside him, trying to help him up, his blood hot and wet on my hands. The guards burst through the door, guns raised. Everything happened in slow motion. I raised my weapon again, knowing I couldn't fight them all, knowing this was how it ended. Then the barn exploded with light and sound. "FBI, drop your weapons." Armed agents swarmed through every entrance, tactical gear and bulletproof vests, weapons trained on everyone. The guards hit the ground. Mason tried to crawl toward his gun, but an agent kicked it away. I collapsed beside Daniel, pressing my hands against his wound. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." "I'm okay," he managed, his hand covering mine. "I'm going to be okay." A female agent crouched beside us. Asian, late 30s, competent and calm. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Agent Sarah Chen. We got your evidence package. All of it. You did good." "I didn't send anything to the FBI," I said, confused. "Grace Holloway did, right before they took her. She uploaded everything to our secure server from her phone." Agent Chen signaled for paramedics. "She gave us this location and timing. Saved both your lives."
Grace.
Beautiful, brave Grace who'd sacrificed everything to make this right. Paramedics surrounded Daniel, stabilizing him, loading him onto a stretcher. I held his hand the entire time, refusing to let go even as they wheeled him toward the ambulance. "Ma'am, you should get checked out too," one paramedic said gently. "I'm staying with my husband." They didn't argue. As they loaded Daniel into the ambulance, I looked back at the barn. Mason was being led away in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. Our eyes met for one brief moment and I felt nothing. No fear.
No anger.
Just relief that it was finally over. At the hospital, ironically, St. Catherine's, though different staff and agents swarmed the place now, Daniel underwent surgery to remove the bullet and repair the damage. I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, watching as administrators and doctors were led away in handcuffs one by one. The conspiracy was falling apart. Every person involved, every fake death certificate, every fraudulent insurance claim, it was all unraveling. Agent Chin sat beside me at one point. "We found Grace Holloway. She's alive. Shaken up, but alive. She'll face charges for her involvement, but her cooperation will help significantly." "She saved us," I said quietly. "Yes, she did." Agent Chin paused. "Your husband is a very brave man. The evidence he collected will put away at least 30 people. This operation has been going on for 5 years. Will he be okay? Legally? He'll need to testify, but he's not facing any charges. He's a witness, not a criminal." She squeezed my shoulder. "You both are. And you're both safe now." When they finally let me see Daniel, he was pale and bandaged but smiling weakly. I rushed to his bedside and took his hand, being careful not to jostle his fore. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey yourself." Tears spilled down my cheeks. You scared me. I scared myself. He lifted his good hand to wipe my tears. I thought I'd lost you. When they told me Mason was living in our house, pretending to be me, staying with you, his voice broke. I wanted to die. But you didn't. You survived. We both did. Because of you. You saved me, Lena. You were so brave. I laughed through my tears. I was terrified every single second. Brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway. He pulled me closer. I love you. God, I love you so much. I love you too. I kissed him gently, tasting salt from both our tears. Don't ever scare me like that again.
Deal.
The next few months were a blur of depositions, testimony, and healing. Daniel's shoulder recovered slowly, requiring physical therapy and patience. The psychological wounds took longer. We both had nightmares. I'd wake up convinced Mason was standing in our doorway. Daniel would wake up gasping, thinking he was still tied to that chair. We started couples therapy and individual counseling. Slowly, painfully, we began to heal. The trial was national news. Mason Vale was sentenced to 35 years. The hospital administrator got 25. Grace Holloway got 5 years with parole eligibility after 2 for her cooperation. I wrote her letters in prison, thanking her for saving our lives. She wrote back, telling me she was studying for her GED, trying to build something good from the wreckage. My sister April called once, trying to explain herself, justify why she'd helped them. I hung up. Some betrayals are unforgivable. 8 months after that terrible night, I sat at my laptop with Daniel napping on the couch beside me, Max curled at his feet. I was writing. The book had started as therapy, a way to process everything that had happened. But as I wrote, I realized our story needed to be told. People needed to know about the corruption, the fraud, the way powerful people could make someone disappear and replace them like they'd never existed. I titled it The Man Who Wasn't My Husband. It was published 6 months later and became a bestseller almost immediately. We did interviews, talked about healthcare fraud and identity theft, helped other families who'd been victims of similar schemes. On a warm evening in early fall, almost exactly a year after the night I got that first terrible phone call, Daniel and I sat on our porch watching the sunset. Max dozed at our feet. Daniel's arm was around my shoulders, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin. I thought I lost you forever. I said quietly, the same words I'd said 100 times. You did, he replied, the same response he always gave. Then he pulled me closer and whispered, but you found me anyway. And in that moment, with my real husband beside me, the nightmare finally, truly over, I understood what we'd survived. We'd been torn apart by violence and conspiracy, by lies and betrayal. We'd been tested in ways that would have destroyed most marriages. But we'd found our way back to each other. And that made us unbreakable. I leaned my head against his shoulder and watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold.
Max stretched and yawned.
Daniel's hand found mine and squeezed gently. What are you thinking about? He asked. How lucky we are. How grateful I am for second chances. I turned to look at him, at his familiar face with its crooked nose and gentle eyes. How I'll never take a single ordinary moment for granted again. He kissed my forehead. Me neither. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm went off. Max's ears perked up briefly before settling back down. Normal sounds. Normal life. The beautiful, mundane existence we'd fought so hard to reclaim. I love you, I said. I love you too. And as darkness fell around us, the porch light casting a warm glow across our intertwined hands, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. We'd survived the worst. Everything else was just living.
And we planned to do a lot of that.
When the person you love most becomes a stranger overnight, how far would you go to uncover the truth? And would you survive what you find? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of betrayal, conspiracy, and the unbreakable bonds that survive even the darkest deceptions.